Gibraltar weren't there. And it wasn't that they were somewhere else or stacked in a way that made them look like they were missing. There was a large, clear gap between other crates where they were supposed to be. Visser went to look for the chief mate and report the problem. He found him in the mess, playing cards with 3 other crew members who had clearly worked on the Tasman long enough to be on sociable terms with its second-in-command. He handed the manifest to the chief mate and pointed to the gap in the column of thin, neat ticks he'd marked down the right-hand side of its pages. "You're sure?" the chief mate asked after several seconds of quiet contemplation. The man was almost 50 years old, and he looked like he'd been at sea for most of them. He wore an officer's uniform, but the deep tan and hard skin on his lined face and thick forearms betrayed a long career below, as well as above deck. Visser nodded. The chief mate was silent for another moment. Then a wide smile spread across his face. "Well, that's their problem," he said. "The dock was clear when we left, and if something's not there, then it's not our fault we can't load it." The next few days sailing across the Mediterranean were uneventful. The quiet time between ports when duties were easy, light, and didn't get much in the way of Visser's new favorite hobby of staring over the prow of the Tasman at the horizon and imagining what was beyond it. The ship put in at Piraeus, but only briefly, the changeover of cargo small enough to not need Visser, who was off shift to help with it. He offered, but the chief mate sent him back up to his bunk almost as soon as he appeared in the hold, telling him half-jokingly that there was a difference between taking on extra work and taking other people's, and that only one of the two would make him friends on a boat like the Tasman. Visser worried if he'd been too eager, if, after making a good impression after Gibraltar, he'd now singled himself out for the wrong reasons. But then his concerns were replaced with barely contained excitement, as he finally reached a latitude and longitude he'd never passed before: the entrance to the Suez Canal. Suez was the gateway to the east, the 120-mile shortcut that had been hewn straight through Egypt to the Red Sea, so ships didn't have to sail all the way round Africa to reach the Indian Ocean. It was the furthest point to which Visser had ever travelled. It was also, he suddenly felt, a point of no return. The Tasman reached Port Said on the Egyptian coast just before nightfall, but it wouldn't enter the canal until morning. Most of the crew took the opportunity to catch up on some sleep, but Visser's mind and body refused to rest. He paced up and down the dark deck, trying to exhaust his limbs, then counted stars for 20 minutes. Neither worked, and he resorted to aimlessly wandering through the ship, eventually ending up meandering through the cargo hold. The hold was never completely silent, but in the middle of the night, with the Tasman's engines running low and the sea on the other side of the hull calm, it was unusually quiet. Visser wondered if this solitude might be what finally pushed him to sleep. But then he reached the very end of the hold and saw something that shouldn't have been there. 2 things, in fact. The crates that hadn't been loaded in Gibraltar. He leaned over them, peering at their labels in the gloom and racking his brain. Had he miscounted after all? Had someone found them and moved them to where they were supposed to be when they'd stopped off in Greece? Or had they already been on there? Visser heard a cough behind him and looked up to find the chief mate, haloed under a lamp, looking down at him. Visser stood up, suddenly feeling guilty for being in the hold. "Couldn't sleep?" the chief mate asked. "No, sir," Visser replied. "First time through the canal, right?" Visser nodded. The chief mate smiled. "I remember mine," he said. "That strip of water stretching out ahead of..."